Welcome to the Be You, Your Story, Your Purpose podcast. Today, my guest is Saloni Surah. Dr. Saloni Surah is a published author of her first children's book, Flora Investigates, The Case of the Missing Gold Eggs. This is a funny, zany book for 5 to 9-year-olds. She is also an HIV and sexual health consultant and has a PhD in HIV infection and drug use. She has worked with marginalized populations all over the world. Working in her particular area of medicine, Dr. Surah became acutely aware of the mind-body connection with regards to ill health and well-being. She has an active interest in meditation, self-development, and other healing modalities. She also works as a spiritual coach using EFT and energy work. Welcome, Saloni. I'm so glad that you could be here with us today. I'm hoping that you can just start off with telling us a little bit more about yourself and your journey, why you're in the place where you're at now.
Sure, of course. So it's a bit of a long-winded journey, or it's not a straight path, shall I say, and it's a bit of a mishmash. But yes, like you say, I am a doctor in HIV sexual health, and I graduated like early 2000s now, so it's a long time ago. The funny thing about training to become a doctor, wasn't expecting to go down this route, but anyway, is you start when you're about 16, like you start preparing and interviews and stuff, and then you graduate, you're in your early 20s, and then you change and life happens. So it's something that I have enjoyed a lot. It's been good and bad, lots of sacrifices, lots of good times, but I settled on HIV and sexual health. Probably, it's the coach coming in that I love that area of transformation. And I like talking to people and meeting people from all over. And I was very blessed in the area of medicine that I worked in that I did that. So yes, I am a HIV sexual health consultant, and I have a PhD on HIV and drug use. And when I started working on the PhD is when I started to write. So prior to that, I was doing some personal development, law of attraction stuff, Reiki, primarily because I wanted to meet a man because I was single. And I was like, there's something going on here. I have to, sort this out and fix it. And as you know, for us girls, if we want children, there's that body clock ticking and all of that. So I'd started my spiritual journey before, and had been working away on that. And then in 2010, I started to write. And the funny thing is, I remember going to a psychic in 2000. I was a medical student at that time. My granddad had died, and it was my first backpacking trip. And I was off to Australia with some friends. And I think my granddad passed the night before I was supposed to go. So it was touch and go as to whether or not I'd make it. And this was before the times of mobile phones. So I remember turning up at the airport. My friend was like, "You're late." And I was like, "Granddad just passed." Anyway, we were in Sydney, and I remember getting this reading from this psychic. We just thought we'd go as a bit of fun. And she said to me at the time, you're going to be a writer and travel the world. And I was like, yeah, whatever, no, it just wasn't on the cards. Anyway, in 2010, after being told by lots of people, like my astrologer and everything, that I should write, I started. Probably doing the PhD, I had a bit of time to myself. And so I started writing about, I think it was dragons at that point. So it was a total contrast to the HIV and drug use and the scientific writing. So it's very formulaic. You have your aim, your hypothesis, your description, your methods. So it was totally different.
Yeah, like free form.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And I just want to interrupt really quickly, just so that people understand your accent. So you're not from Australia. You're from the UK, right?
I'm from the UK. Yes, I've worked all over. I did live in Australia for a year. Yes, I'm from the UK, the north UK. So I'm from a little place called Chester, which is close to Manchester and Liverpool. So you may know, but you may not. I suppose football, or hang on, it's close to Wrexham. So if you're into Ryan Reynolds and the football club, it's literally just over the border.
Wonderful.
So it's funny that it's become famous for that. But yeah, from the UK.
Fantastic. Thank you for explaining that. Okay, back to your story about writing more fantasy stuff, right?
Yes, magic stuff, basically. So it was, magic. So I write about magic, basically, and I weave those magic threads in the book. So, they're magical books, but they're also books with a theme because, I've seen a lot of poverty, illiteracy, sexual abuse, rape. I worked as a forensic sexual assault examiner for a little bit, drug use. So I've heard it all. And for me, it's important to have a theme and, really looking after that chaos. And it was a pleasure and a privilege to do that. Um, I wanted to inspire, I wanted to, I was having people coming in, things weren't going to change for them. They were they are in their lives. But for me, it was really about, well, how can we make things better? And, children is where it's at. So if you can inspire them to dream. So Flora's really a book about a girl who has a dream, who doesn't give up. It's a lot of fun. There's gold eggs and there's a flying boat and, there's a crazy cheese-eating, dancing, flying pirate and a hunter and a lot of cats. But it's really a book about a girl who has a dream and who goes for it and who doesn't give up. Probably much like me in, publishing books and at one point doing my PhD, because that was a hard slog as well. But it was to kind of inspire children to say, dream, keep on dreaming, because some children don't get anyone reading to them or telling them that they can do things, or that anything is possible. And, that's what I want to do, is to say, yes, you can do it and anything is possible. I'm a change agent, really. That I was redoing my website. So I'll be putting a coaching page on there, but I'm a change agent. I love to see transformation change.
So when you started writing, was that part of the reason for it, a therapy for you too, after, seeing so much difficulties within your own line of work?
I think so, yeah. So it was funny. My first book, I need to pull up, and it's calling to me again, but that will be a total scrap. And I was writing my story, basically, I realize now. And then, the books have all been themes of things I've gone through, yeah. And other people. So I've got a fairy book coming out next year, and it's about a bit of forbidden friendship between a fairy and a human girl, and wings at risk because the fairy forest is at risk, and humans are taking it. And it's a book about having your wings clipped and how it happens to us all in life, unfortunately, or most of us, and how we get that back and how we forgive and move on. And I've seen that in my children as well, unfortunately. So it's I was literally this morning finished the edits to go back to the editor, and was like, the last time I wrote it, I was looking at this going, gosh, this is me, and this is, I've had these conversations with my children, and how many of us does this happen to?
Right. That's amazing. I love that you have, put your energies not only in the scientific world, but also in this realm of dreaming and exploring possibilities. I think that's absolutely wonderful. I'd love to go into your medical career a little bit, because that has been a quite a journey there. I'm just curious, after reading your biography or your intro, what you got your PhD in HIV infection and drug use.
Yeah.
So I'm just curious, because I've always heard of HIV been like a blood transfusion or a sexually transmitted disease. So is there a connection between HIV and drug use? Like, how did you connect the two?
Yes, there is. So, and it's to do with blood, so it's kind of akin to blood transfusion. So, I was thinking about this earlier. When HIV initially came about, there were certain cohorts or populations that we saw it in. Men who have sex with men, certain ethnic minorities, blood transfusions, and then drug users because of sharing needles and injecting equipment.
That's true. Got it.
So that was kind of it. And Dublin, where I worked, did my PhD, was rife. It was very poor. It was flooded with heroin, and it was rife. And they had these shooting galleries, so you go and share needles, or they'd rent them out. So there were other cities, like in the UK, I think Liverpool might have been. They tidied it up, so they put in clean needles. But some cities, they were like, no, if we don't give clean needles, they won't use, and they did. And so you have historically these cities where the public health and the police policy was prohibitive, and that's where the rates shot up. So that's it. And obviously, a lot of these individuals now, the HIV risk has gone down, but the hepatitis C is the big one.
All right, it just keeps going. So and I can understand how that would work into working with marginalized people. So how are you able to work with marginalized people all over the world then? Like what led you to those avenues?
So obviously, if you work in the field of HIV and sexual health, you have people from everywhere. So I worked in London, I worked in Dublin, I worked in Australia for a year, but I wasn't doing HIV. And there's just people from all over. So, I've looked after, people from, the African continent, the Asian continent, drug users, asylum seekers, refugees. Mixed bag, South Americans. So, it has been a mixed bag. It's fun. I'm quite good at my accents now. I'm always very good at going, where's that accent from? Or where's your name from? But ironically, when I moved to Ireland, I found the Irish names the hardest. And I remember I'd be coming out of my clinic room to call the names, and I have to say to the nurses, how do I pronounce this? Because they're so challenging, the Celtic names sometimes.
Yeah, they're totally different. I know that, and well, yeah, the Irish names. I've seen that a little bit, and I'm like, I don't even know that. And Welsh. I think Welsh is difficult to pronounce something. Yeah, like I'll read books with Welsh names, and I'm like, okay, I have no idea. And if I can't pronounce a name in my brain when I'm reading a book, it drives me nuts. And so I have to like go and research, like, okay, how do you pronounce this? And just so that I can make sure there's some continuity in my reading. So a little particular thing about me. So.
Okay. Have you read a lot of Welsh books then? Because I'm just over the border, so it's funny you say that. And I went to med school in Wales, so yeah.
Oh, that's wonderful. So it comes easily. Do you speak Welsh also?
No. I can speak a few words. I could say like, oh, I'm tired, and cheers, probably, and that might be it now. My Welsh has dwindled, but no, I don't know.
Yeah, it's a totally different language. It's fascinating to me, super fascinating. So how, like, when you say you're good at accents, you're good at understanding where they're from. Is that correct?
Working out where people are from, or yes. So yeah, I'm quite good with the Nigerians and the African ones. Yeah, I mean, it's not as good as it used to be, but yes, I'm or the area. But I kind of go, where's your accent from, or where's your name from now? So because if you say to a Canadian, are you American? Well, obviously that's like
obviously not right.
And if you say to an Irish person, are you English? They're going to explode. So
right. That's a really fun skill to have gained, and I'm sure it's something you never thought, oh, this is something that I want to have someday. So.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because I'm back in Chester, and I looking at schools for my children, and I want them to have that exposure too, and it's much more mixed than when I was growing up, but not so much, and certain areas aren't so much. So it's because I think it's wonderful to be mixed, to exposed to different cultures and languages, and yeah. So that's something I have to navigate in the future.
And that what kind of led me to my next question, having been, because obviously you've traveled to different places, right?
Mm.
So how has it been to assimilate within the culture of the area? Has that been difficult at all?
I'm not sure I fully assimilated. So it's funny. I don't know whether I ever feel like I belong. I was doing medicine, and I always felt on the fringes, and maybe that's just a product of my upbringing. But I don't know that I don't, certainly where I've ended up back, I would never have expected to end up back in Chester. And it's not my place. I mean, it was the right move at the right time. But, it's probably, have I assimilated it? I'm probably quite different to a lot of the other mums here. I'm probably a lot older because I had my children older, and that was just the way my life had panned out, basically. But I often feel like I don't belong, and I'm just going to be open about that. And that's probably also why I write, because I'm looking for my soul tribe, and I'm looking for those connections. And I know that I'm not the only one like that,
Yeah, and that's interesting. Because I've struggled with feeling belonging in certain times of my life. And I think that's something that I would imagine most people go through at some point in their life. So what have you done to help you feel like you've belonged? Because it's, you say that now, and you have talked with me earlier about not feeling that belonging in your work area. So can you dive a little bit deeper into that and how that was a struggle for you?
Yes, it was a huge it's a huge piece of sadness for me, and there was a lot of grief because it was an environment that I had loved. It was a place that I'd bit back and forth to London and Dublin for years. It was a place that I'd gone back to do a PhD and then to go back as a consultant. And I'd loved it. When I first moved to Dublin, I loved it. I'd lived in London for a long time. I had a great social life. I'd worked at it because, when you move country and I was on my own, dynamics change. You don't have that history. You don't have things you can fall back onto. So my attitude was I just went to everything I got invited to, basically, and was like, right, I'm going to try things, which is good in a way, but it was also lonely in another way. But the work environment, it's a huge piece of sadness for me. It ended up into an unpleasant, toxic environment and bullying. And I wasn't the only one that experienced it. And I think it's sad because often these things don't need to get to that point. At the beginning, they're often subtle, and a lot of people will put them across as personality issues. And that's what I found very hard, was that it wasn't personality issues. There was something going on, and that, they're not dealt with properly. And with the right people, they can be handled much better. So I'm going to use somebody else's words. I remember going to a talk by the governor of one of the big prisons in Dublin, Mountjoy Prison. Brilliant guy, great talk. And it was a talk about bullying in a hotel in Dublin. And I remember him saying at the beginning, look, it's often very subtle. And you can't quantify. You don't have these quantifiable things. And if, like me, you're sensitive, you know that something's up. And how do you verbalize that? And people want specifics, and you can't. And I remember him saying, if it makes you feel uncomfortable, then it's not right. But also that the individuals that do this are often clever. They're versed at it. They target certain people, and they're different to different people, as we all are. So I think my sadness about it is that I just wanted to go to work and feel safe, and that I had some dignity there, and that I didn't really want anything bad to happen to anybody, but I wanted it to be dealt with, and I wanted people to get the help and support that they needed, because we know that people act out or misbehave because of trauma or things that have happened. And it doesn't just stop, it continues. So the more people that let it happen, or don't say no, or don't say this individual needs help, or what can we do, or psychology, they're just enabling that. And that's what happens. And unfortunately, in the healthcare setting, I don't know what it's like in the US, but UK and Ireland, these things just tend to get brushed under the carpet. And if you're the individual saying there's an issue, nobody wants to hear, and often you get targeted if you progress this. So I think that's the shame about it, is that it didn't need to get to this point. And I'm certainly not somebody who will be like, oh my goodness. I tend to go with solutions of psychology and external people in and training, because as the governor of Mountjoy, and I can't remember his name, said, workplaces become toxic. And that's what happened. It's war. The whole place becomes toxic. And it's like, I've looked after plenty of individuals who have personality disorders, and there's certain ones, if they came in onto the ward, the whole place would be disrupted. Like the whole ward, it would just, the one individual coming in would disrupt the whole ward. It would just be chaos. They had that influence and impact. And so it's like that in workplaces. So I think that's my shame and sadness about it, is that it doesn't need to get to this point. And I remember talking to people, and they were like, well, you can't change people. And I was like, I understand that, but you can make them take responsibility for the way they make other people feel. And the impact that their behavior has on other people. If you're having a bad day, it's not okay to take it out on somebody else. And, plenty of people do that. So yes, that, I suppose, I'm talking broad terms, but that's kind of my feeling about it. It's not to muddling, but it's saying these things, they happen all over. They happen in schools, they happen in workplaces, they happen in families. And, how do we deal with it better? Rather than, what often happens is, victims leave, get traumatized, careers get affected, individuals then go on to continue in other workplaces. It costs workplaces far less to just rehabilitate and get people in and get people back on, rather than the amount of time and energy that's spent on trying to further victimize the victim and not deal with somebody who's not behaved well, and the enablers. Because, often for me, it's the people that have stood by and watched and haven't taken action, or have, the ghosting and the gaslighting. So, I think that's a shame. And I think that's something that could massively be improved. And I remember this guy, Governor Mountjoy, saying, if you're not being listened to, then you just have to leave, because it's not going to get better. But, a lot of people aren't in a position to leave. They've got families or finances, or by the point it gets to that point, they're unwell. They have, I ended up with PTSD, they have PTSD, mental health issues. And, when you're in that position, going to an interview and going somewhere new, it's just, it's not possible.
Difficult. Right. I love this saying that I've heard many times, that it's hurt people hurt people.
Yeah.
And it is a cycle. So I'm fascinated, and I feel bad that you have experienced this, but I think you're right. It's very, very common. I have worked in toxic places, and it is not a fun thing. It is really difficult to get up in the morning and go, oh my gosh, I have to do this another day, and then another day. So how did you prepare yourself every day to go through that? I mean, eventually you left, but when you were in it, how did you help yourself get through it?
Well, I think the only reason I managed for so long was because I was working part-time, and because I wrote and I coached. And I think that is what helped me to function. I mean, I remember one of my colleagues saying, who was in the similar boat, saying that they used to sit on the bed, because we do ward rounds on a weekend, and they used to sit on the bed on a Saturday for the ward round and cry, like before going in. And, I think it's tough. How do you? I don't know that there is a particular way. I mean, the only thing that got me through for so long, and I don't know whether that was the right thing, was that I worked part-time and I wrote and I coached. And whilst it got me to a certain point, I still ended up with PTSD, and it wasn't able to cure that. I needed to go to have a formal diagnosis, which took me about 2 years to get, unfortunately. And what worked for me was the EMDR. That really did transform it for me to move forward, and to be able to talk to you about it now.
That's really powerful. So what I heard you say is you had other outlets. You had a creative outlet. You had an outlet where you could talk to other people. Not necessarily, it sounds like you did therapy as well, too. So you're helping other people. You've got a creative outlet, and you are getting help yourself. So that's a really great formula. And you're still dealing with the effects of it, right? I've done EMDR therapy. It is so powerful. And I have found really, really great release of trauma that I've experienced in my own life. And so I think it's fantastic that you went that route. What did you find the best thing about EMDR? I'm just curious about your thoughts on that.
So it is a bit like EFT. I don't know.
Actually, I'm going to pause. Yeah. Can you explain what it is? Because there may be people listening who are like, what's EMDR? So could you explain what that's like, at least in your experience?
Okay. So I don't know what the exact term is, but it's rapid eye movement desensitization therapy, I think. And for me, it was talking about, so for me, there was lots of things, but it hinged on an incident that I had hoped would transform the situation for the better, but that actually ended up being incredibly traumatic for me. And there's no need to go into the particulars of that. And there was a lot of time focused on that. And it was funny, at that point it was COVID. I'd had my son. I was incredibly unwell. I actually ended up getting birth trauma because I had PTSD going into the birth, but that's a separate issue. And I remember talking through it, talking about it, and she'd made me tap. So I was just like tapping like this because it was on camera. Now with my birth trauma, I think she used the finger more, so I was following the finger. So the different therapists, but yes, it was talking about at the worst, the instance at the worst, and doing this, and it kind of they don't know exactly how it works, but it kind of re-scrambles the brain in a way. Is the only way I can think of it, because prior to that, I wouldn't have been able to talk to you about this and not cry. And I wouldn't have been able to talk about my, first child's birth and how I was without crying. It's still sad and it still upsets me, but I'm able to talk about it and to function and move forward, which is, something. I mean, after
Progress.
that, yeah, after that therapy, I started making plans for the future and I put weight on. I was 7.5 stone and, wanted to be dead at that point with a young child. So that really helped. And I went back for birth therapy with my daughter because prior to getting pregnant, I knew that that hadn't been resolved. And I was having nightmares. So when I was pregnant, I was having nightmares about giving birth. And, I had a pleasurable birth. It didn't have the home birth or the water birth that I wanted, but it wasn't that fear of flight to flight that I had imagined or that I'd experienced with the first one.
So did you get into EFT? So EFT is oh my goodness, I've done EFT for over 20 years, about 20 years. And I'm forgetting what it stands for all the
Emotional freedom technique.
Thank you. Emotional. I'm like, I knew it. I've done it for years, but so did you get into EFT after? So this is otherwise known as tapping. You got into that before, so you're kind of familiar with that. So yes. Tell us about your journey with EFT, kind of those modalities. Yeah.
Okay. Well, the EFT was a funny one. I remember going to this psychic reader and he was talking to me about relationships because I wanted to meet somebody. And he was like, you've self-sabotaged. And, there'll be, I shouldn't say this, there'll be an attractive guy in the corner and a short bald guy, and you'll go with the short bald guy because you don't think you're good enough. And I thought, I don't. So I was like, well, I need to do something about this. So I went online and looked at tapping videos. I can't remember why now. And started doing some tapping videos on that. And then I started following this woman called Margaret Lynch, who has this video called Tapping for $50,000. And I thought, well, I'll do this because who doesn't want more money? So right. I started following her. And I was doing my PhD, so it might be towards the end, and I was due to go back to London. And she had an event. And I thought, I'd like to go to this. But it was in Boston, and I was in the island UK. And I thought, that's crazy. Like, I can't do something like that. So I put it out to the universe and said, look, if I'm meant to go, I'm going to get a free ticket to this event because I'm not paying to go as well as flying. Anyway, I ended up getting a free ticket. I bought the book, and with her Tapping into Wealth book, you got a free ticket. And it was just one of those things where everything aligned. I managed to get the time off work. I was moving back to London. I got the time off. I literally went for 3-4 days for the event. I might have gone for a day before on my own. So I felt crazy. And, I got reasonable flights and booked into the hotel and was incredibly triggered there. I was like, what the hell? Everyone's, a coach, and I'm just like this doctor coming for this retreat, and they're all really intense. Anyway, I signed up for her package, which for me was a big investment, and I remember signing up and crying in the toilets, and some random person held me whilst I cried. And I did the program, and part of that was, there was a lot of tapping in it, and it also included with tapping into wealth coach training, and I just thought it would be silly to not do it. So I finished my PhD, or in between. I took a bit of time off to write up my PhD because it was just a bit intense, and I thought, look, I need a bit of time. And in that time period, I did tapping into wealth training, and that's what got me coaching. Now, during the 1 year of the program, they kept on saying, oh, you should coach. And I was like, but how and what? So that gave me the framework to start coaching, basically.
So while you were going through your toxic work environment, you were also coaching using emotional freedom technique or tapping.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's really interesting, and I can see how that would ground you in a way to deal with that toxic environment. I'm just going to explain just a little bit for those people who are listening who don't know what EFT is. It's you are it's a brain recalibration, really, and where you are tapping on certain meridian points of your body to basically, it's the way I understand it is you've got blocks, right? And you are just like opening the doors to those gates that have been shut. And I do think that it is related to EMDR therapy. And that's been, I've done a little bit of combination on that too. So it's been really, really beneficial for me. So that's really fascinating. So how you said you went through, the therapy to get over that. So how did you break your own pattern of that sadness and that shame that, having gone through the bullying at work and that toxic environment?
So I think it's tough, and it's taken me quite a long time, and it's taken a lot of work. So a lot of that goes back to ancestral family stuff of girls in the family, female side, know your place, and money's not for you. And that was the whole underpin of my life was and why I'd been single for so long, and I'd attracted in relationships where I wasn't treated as I wanted. And at one point I knew that the issue was me and not the men, that it was me, something in me. It's taken a long time, and I think the EMDR helped. All the work that I did helped. The writing helped. I did a bit of Vedic art painting. I think it just all came together with maturity. I just kept on going and working and doing stuff. And then eventually, I feel like the last year, 18 months, I was like, okay, I am good enough and I do love myself. But it's taken this long, 40 plus years to get to that point where I can say that. And, I don't think it's overnight. Even if you want to do it, when you try and do those affirmations and you're not aligned, it can be really unpleasant, and you try and force it. So it is a time and space thing. And also, seeing things clearly, I think one of the big things is being able to see things clearly. Because often we can't, because to survive certain situations, we have to cloud things. Otherwise we just wouldn't be able to cope. And that's a coping mechanism. I think probably also having my own children. I certainly do not want this stuff passing down to them. And, I want to be, as good as I can be as a mother, as emotionally available as I can be, and emotionally aware and attuned to them. And I know at the beginning with my first, I was not in a good place. And, the EMDR really helped me with that guilt over that, because I had a lot of guilt about that. I desperately wanted, I'd wanted a child for a very long time, but it wasn't the way I wanted it to be. And, I have a huge amount of sadness about the PTSD not being diagnosed, because I would have gone and paid for help if I had known. And I remember going, I had seen psychiatrists, I was going to occupational health, I'd seen medical health services, I was going to psychiatry at the maternity hospital. And I remember going to that psychiatrist at the maternity hospital and saying, send me to a psychologist. I don't want to feel like this. So I didn't know I had PTSD, and I'm a doctor. I had presumed it was like you'd been to war and that was who had it. I didn't realize that something like that could do it. I didn't realize that women after losing children have PTSD. The amount of how common it is. And I'm clearly not the only one, because I've had plenty of medical professionals, friends, colleagues who are like, just get over it, just come back to work, all of this stuff. And that's the sadness about it. Sort yourself out. And anyway, remember the psychiatrist saying, well, look, we don't want people to return to those workplaces and be resilient, but nobody would do me a supporting letter or anything like that. Or, and so nobody had mentioned it, or, I think I might have had one or two anxiety, depression screens, but nobody had screened me properly for it. And so that's the sadness now, is that I didn't need to get to that point. It could have been nipped in the bud. And even, like I say, there wasn't psychology in the hospital at that point, but at least then I would have been in a position to decide whether or not I wanted to pay for it. And it would have been something I would have chosen to invest, or may have been an avenue to look at doing that, or getting it, for people who can't afford, because like certainly the psychiatric hospitals in Dublin have a lot of alternative therapies. So I think that's the sadness about it.
And I've experienced things like that too. When I look back and I go, oh, if only I'd known this, but gosh, we can do that all day long, and we can beat ourselves up for things that we didn't know. But I think the real value is knowing that once you did know, you did something about it. And there is value in just knowing things, and putting forth that effort to learn it. One of my favorites, it's one of my mantras, I guess, is after having gone through, some really dark times and having to really dig deep to find, uncloud things like you were talking about, it was hard to get that clarity, right? And to accept it. But I really learned that honesty, I think you could substitute clarity, is the precursor to freedom, right? You free yourself from that heavy weighted cloud by seeing it for what it really is and dealing with it rather than just carrying it with you,
Absolutely. And there are a lot of people who can't do that, who won't be able to, and it happens at the right time. And certainly there are huge amounts of individuals that I looked after who were never going to be able to do that, because of what they'd been through, or because of their coping skills and their life skills, yes, absolutely.
So you've talked a little bit about this mind-body connection, and we've alluded to it through EMDR and through the tapping and all that. Can you dive a little bit more into, from your perspective as a doctor and seeing the things that you've seen, what evidence have you found of this connection? I think it's generally accepted, but I'm curious if you've had any personal experiences with this that you're just like, oh my gosh, this is like 100% real.
Okay, so I am not like most doctors, and it depends on the specialty. So the sexual health and HIV field would be a more different and open field, and probably a bit more holistic. But certainly in the field of sexual health, and I'll talk about the HIV in a minute, we know there's a lot of mind-body connections. So this is sexually transmitted infections and that stuff, and you see quite a lot of young men coming in saying that they're having problems with erectile dysfunction or not being able to be intimate with a partner, and then you do the questions, and one of the first ones is, are you waking up with erections? And usually when they say yes, that that's not a physical thing, there's a psychological thing going on there. So it might well be you delve a bit deep, it may well be it's a new partner that they actually really like, or they don't like, or there's something going on in the relationship. It's often similar with some men when they have discharge and you've done the screening and there's no STIs, and then you're digging deeper and you're finding out that they might have cheated on a partner, or they've got a partner at home they cheated on who's pregnant, and all of this stuff, and they're convinced they've got something. So it's an area of medicine where you see these things and how they manifest from an STI point of view. But like with the HIV side, I had looked after individuals who had terrible addiction problems, may have been homeless, psychiatric problems. But, if you look at their upbringings, many had been sexually abused. I remember being told stories of being sexually abused and sitting in a bath afterwards, and all of this stuff. They grew up in areas where, some of them would be walking on sheets of needles. There was a lot of poverty, a lot of illiteracy, neglectful parents at the best, or abusive parents, children being given sleeping tablets and benzos and things, and they really stood no chance of another life. There was no, it's the exception rather than the rule that somebody breaks out of that. If that's what you're used to, that's what you're brought up with, that's your conditioning, you've got no money, that's what you're surrounded with all the way, all every day. How do you break out of that? Especially if you've got huge amounts of trauma. You don't. It's the exception to the rule. And so, takes me back to, the coaching and the books of, it would be a revolving door for some of these guys, and very sad. But I wasn't going to be able to change that. It just was what was. Well, you could give them the tablets and this, that, and the other, but often it was more than that. It wasn't just the tablets. So it was the social stuff or this, that, and the other, and they weren't really going to ever deal with things. And I kind of feel sometimes with a healthcare setting, a lot of it, could do with being more holistic, and a lot of it's about the individual. And, I used to have people come to me, and I did an even clinic, Women's Health Service, and I'd have people come to me from the other hospital saying, we wanted to come and talk, I want to come and talk to you. So yes, I saw it firsthand of how that manifested basically in people's lives and relationships and everything. The same with like a parent who's had sexual trauma or been abused or raped. You can see how that fear gets passed down generations to the next generation, of the shame or the guilt. It's subconscious, and the kids pick up on it, and then they alters their perception and relationships with regard to healthy sexuality and healthy relationships, and it does get passed on.
That's so fascinating to me, because I believe that, but I haven't seen that in the medical field. And so I think I'm grateful for you to sharing your experiences with us about that, and how, it really is connected, and you cannot get away from that because we are spiritual beings in a physical body. That's just the way it works. So that's super, super fascinating. So I wanted to talk to you a little bit about your purpose. Obviously you've morphed, and I think that's very normal. And I really loved understanding what your journey has looked like. And I don't think anybody's journey is all roses. We all go through trials and struggles, and they're very, very unique to each one of us.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering, what you see now as your life purpose, like because obviously you've changed so much. So you've got your coaching and your writing, that you do those two primarily now, right?
So I haven't done any coaching for a while, so I'm opening up that space. So my youngest is going to be 2. So the last year I've kind of got back on my feet, essentially. Mm-hmm. The medicine is, I don't know, long term. And obviously life has changed because I have children now. So, at the time I didn't. But at the moment I'm focused on the books and seeing where that goes. I am feeling that, I would like to open up the coaching. So, I'm open for the right coaching client. Up until now, it's always been people coming to me, and I haven't really advertised and gone out. Part of that's been energetic. Part of that's just been the space that I've been. And, I probably wouldn't be somebody who'd be having like 20 clients a month, because it's just the energetics for me and the time management of that's the way it works. But I'm looking forward to doing that again, opening that space up. Obviously things are different when I did it last. So I do a bit more kind of pendulum dowsing work, but it's really an individual thing of whatever people come up with. So I've had worked on love with people. I've worked on money. So originally it was money coaching, but it's not really about the money. The money is all about their belief system. The last time I was up coaching was, I worked with a family. It was great. So I did the mum, dad, and the kids, and it was wonderful. Because I missed working with younger people. I used to enjoy that about my job. So yes, at the moment I have a second book coming out, hopefully February, March of next year. My first book is out. I've got lots of books, so I've been writing for 13 years, and I would like to release some of the older ones. And I also have some adult books that I'd like to do. And there's books coming up for my kids. So as my kids getting older, that I want to write children's books for them. So that's exciting, and the coaching, and I'm open to seeing where the road takes me, really.
Well, and isn't it awesome that we go through life, and there are moments where it's full steam ahead, and other times where you have fallen back, and And what I see is somebody who has, taken a step back and is moving forward in a space of knowing who you are and being very, very intentional about your time and how you spend it and how you want your energy to be gathered and spread, right? So did I
Absolutely.
do that
That's
correctly?
wonderful.
Okay.
Yeah, no, that's
Right.
perfect. That's wonderful. I mean, when I went back as a consultant last time, I was part-time. I mean, I had periods of being full-time, but that was a conscious choice for me because I wanted to pursue my other interests. I wanted to pursue my writing and my coaching and have time for me. I knew that if I carried on working as I had, I was going to be single forever and not have children. And that wasn't the way I wanted my life to go. And, again, it's like the same. I like variety. So even when I was working as a doctor, I had lots of different jobs. I like variety, but I also like space too. And I have young children, so I do want to spend time with them. I don't want them to be looked after somebody else all the time, even though it's hard work.
It is. So, given your experience and your training and everything that you've gone through, what can you share with us a bit of wisdom that you have learned through your journey?
For me, it's about community and connection. So, I want to say people are wonderful. That's what came to my head. It's about community and connection. That's really what I'm feeling right now. And it's taken me a long time, as you said, to get back home to me and who I am and what makes me happy. I spent a lot of time trying to please other people and do what I was meant to do and perceived of me. And now it's really about, I think, choosing to be happier in the simple. It's not all about the expensive holidays and this, that, and the other, but it's also about connections with like-minded people and community and getting out there. So I really want to inspire and bring magic to people. There might be dark bits, so I'm not saying my books aren't dark. There are dark bits there, but I love change, I love transformation, and that happens with both the books and coaching, and it happened with the medicine as well. It would be wonderful when you saw people that had come on and transformed their lives, and that had come when they were unwell and maybe, come and had a baby with us, and then, those families developing. So I like transformation and change and to see people grow. I'm a change agent, really.
Right. That's really beautiful how you've been able to morph that into your books too. So I want to try something new. I haven't done this before in my podcast, and I'm so grateful for what you have shared and your experience and being willing to talk with us a little bit about some of your darker moments and what you've learned from that. But I wanted to end on a little bit of a lighter note and give you 3 rapid fire questions. These are just short answers, and just thought it would be fun. So, and it helps us to get to know you in just a little bit different light. So here's the first one. What is one thing that you wish you enjoyed more?
So I wish I had enjoyed the immediate period after having my first child a bit more. I was just really like, oh my goodness, what's just happened? What am I doing? And shell shocked after the birth. So I kind of look back and go, it was a wonderful time, and they were a beautiful baby, and I did enjoy it, but I wish I'd enjoyed it a little bit more.
Yeah, taking that a little bit differently.
Yeah.
What movie do you enjoy quoting the most?
So I don't really quote movies that much. I was thinking about this, but
or TV show. That will count, because I'm not much of a TV watcher, but I know some people are more than movies.
A quote that I use a lot that drives my husband crazy, and I used to go to my patients a lot, and it's not in a movie or TV, is, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different outcome. And my husband's always like, oh my goodness. And I'd say it to my patients, and they'd be like, half of them didn't really get what I'm saying. But I was like, really? Don't get me wrong, I had a lot of fun with them. So there were a lot of jokes and there were a lot of fun, and there was a lot of laughter. But we used to get our toilet seat stolen. So I go anywhere now and I'm like, where's my handbag?
That's
where's
so
my
random.
coat? Used to get the toilet seat straight stolen. So I'm everywhere I go, I'm like, coat, handbag, where are things? And my husband's like, what? Because he just leaves stuff. I'm like, how can you just leave stuff?
Right. Okay, last one. What is something on your bucket list and why is it there?
Okay, so I've always wanted to do a hot air balloon over the Serengeti, and I haven't done a hot air balloon because a friend of mine um did a big trip around Africa, and she said, "Oh, I've done one over the Serengeti," and I was like, "Oh my goodness, no, I have to do one over the Serengeti because nowhere else is going to compare, and I haven't made
Right.
it to the Serengeti yet." So yeah,
Well, fantastic. I hope you get to do that.
thank
Thank
you,
you so much for taking your time to be with us here today. I learned a lot today and
thank
I
you.
really appreciate it. I love learning. I love understanding where people come from and the different experiences that they have because there's so much knowledge out there to gain, and if we share it. So it's wonderful. So thank you so
Thank
much.
you. Thank you for chatting. It's been fun.
It has been. And for those of you who are listening, please remember that your purpose is in your story. Until next time, we'll see you. Bye.